Hello, welcome to Financial Stockholm, and I'm Christopher Crystal. Today is March 9th, 2023, and these are our thoughts and reflections on the market. And please remember that you should use these points as discussion points with your advisor. Get all your investment advice, how you're setting up your strategy or what you're doing for your portfolio and how you're overlaying your portfolio, that you should all do with your investment advisor. These are just the discussion points if you're looking at the Nordics, okay? And so in Sweden, we're bitterly cold today. We had minus 30 up north, and we had minus 12 down here in the morning when I got up with my dog. He's a black lab, so he loves the cold, and this is a classic March, in my opinion, from what I've seen of 20 years here. And remembering how they would shut down the outdoor hockey rinks, and then that would be the end of the outdoor season. You couldn't play outdoors. You had to find indoor rinks, and some of them were shutting down and so forth. So it was really, this is classic. But we're looking at Sweden, and we're seeing center party politics. They're dropping the most, and part of the problem with their popularity is because of the price of electricity. So up north with minus 30 and using a lot of hydropower, they're going to have very expensive electricity right now. Down here down south, where we shut down a lot of our nuclear, we're also experiencing very expensive nuclear power. And this is really a result of what happened since 1979, where they decided to shut down nuclear reactors. And you had the center party, you've had the Social Democrats, even last year at their conference and when they were campaigning, they were talking about wind power. They were not talking about nuclear power. And they called nuclear power too expensive. So if we, on that point, what I want to highlight is if you look at Germany, okay, for the Energiewende, where they're turning around their whole energy program. If you look at California, which everybody here in Sweden loves and loves to go to, and is really kind of one of these sunny, beautiful places in America, but transitioned over to a lot of renewable energy. And then if you look at Texas, which is a really good example, because Texas has been one of the largest consumers and investors into renewable energies. All right, from 2000, they invested 66 billion into wind and solar, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the point is that electricity prices are more expensive with these alternative sources than with nuclear. So it would be great if somebody like Ebba Busch would stop her love affair with windmills and start to look at nuclear. Hopefully that trip to France with the invitation from Macron helped her out. And so if we go back to use Texas as an example, because it's under the radar for many people, except for when they had this terrible winter issue a couple years ago. They had 66 billion spent on US dollars on wind turbines and solar. And then you had the grid shutting down. Now, during that winter storm, the average windmill was supposed to be working at around 8%. 8% of the supplying 8% of the grid network needs, and they were. These algorithms and the wind patterns, they worked relatively the way they were supposed to, or counted on. And however, the grid shut down because there wasn't enough megahertz. You need 60 megahertz in the US to keep the power station running. There wasn't enough natural gas. The gas goes into the power stations, but the homes have first priority. So the power stations didn't have enough natural gas. They didn't have coal on hand to start up the plants. So everything froze. Eventually the windmills froze. Eventually, people died. And this is what happens when you get a cold winter. So when you look at the ERCOT story, it's very similar to what we've had here in Europe. And if you look at what's happening in Georgia, they built some of the, they built the two new reactors, and they started doing atom splitting yesterday on International Women's Day, and which is fantastic because you see the Vogtle units 3 and 4 starting to split atoms and getting up to the point where they're going to be powering something like 1.5 million homes. and they're going to be producing 17 million megawatt hours of capacity, and they have generation capacity of 2,200 megawatt hours. And this is really fantastic because you're creating a scenario where you had 9,000 jobs at the peak of construction for the plants. Okay, you have a continuation of 800, 900 people working onwards in Georgia for this. And I'm mentioning Georgia specifically because Freyr, the Norwegian company, the Norwegian battery company, is really relocating. They bought 300 acres of land in Coweta, Georgia, to build these nuclear, or to build their battery power giga plants. And you have just around the corner, 43 minutes away, the nuclear reactors that were set up in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you want to build an economy and you want to grow your economy and have happy people, this is a great way to do it. And this is what Georgia is doing and what Sweden should emulate. Now, we got some positive news today about Vattenfall. Vattenfall is going to continue the study for nuclear SMR reactors at Ringhole 1 and 2. And now that's good news, but this is a very Swedish thing to do, to agree to continue the study. And it's a very common joke here. We should take a coffee and discuss. And that's really what's happening. They're prolonging the discussion process. We already know that we should have the nuclear. We already know who the big builders are. We have a European supplier. We have South Korean suppliers. We have Japanese suppliers. So it's not a question of are there available sources. We have American suppliers. We've been working with Westinghouse. So we could easily choose the same build out that Georgia has. We could choose the same build out that France has been setting up in China and India. We could choose the same that the South Koreans have done for 20% of their power needs, and they've been building down in the Middle East. It's not hard, but we should, as we've been using Westinghouse in the past, it might make sense to continue using Westinghouse and then have them build out. So Vattenfall's spokesperson made an announcement about this. Hopefully we'll see Ebba Busch speeding the process, speed the plow. As we have their party in control of the government, it can be done. And this would stop a lot of the hypocrisy that we've seen from the European governments. And so Germany and Sweden in particular have been promoting ESG and then doing things that are counterproductive to what they've been saying and telling their voters they would do. So all the way back in 2014, Germany sent a letter to our Stefan Löfven, who had just become prime minister, saying that Vattenfall needed to continue investing in its coal mine industry in Germany so that Germany would still have power in the winter despite shutting down the nuclear reactors. Now, normally the correct transition is to go from gas to nuclear or from coal to nuclear, because then you're eliminating your emissions, which you're concerned with. And this coal, the lignite coal that Vattenfall was digging up, is a very, very high particulate, and so it becomes a problem. So what's pure hypocrisy here is Germany writing to Sweden. The link is in the notes, so please go to that. That's available on the Substack. But Sweden actually acquiescing and doing this, all the while saying how they were very strong on ESG. It's an outright lie and unfortunate. But that's history. So what we can do is get the current government, Ebba Busch, hopefully, to approve 2 SMRs, because Vattenfall has said they need to in order for it to be profitable. Now, the irony to all of this is that yesterday was International Women's Day, something we love to celebrate here in Sweden without definition. And there is an individual that is really, really just outstanding in relation to nuclear energy. And her name was Lisa Meitner. Originally, she was from Austria. Her accomplishments in the nuclear world, from doing things like winning the Enrico Fermi Award She was really just an outstanding individual. She was born in Austria. Then, because of World War II and her Jewish heritage, she had to move to Sweden. And she wound up at the Academy of Sciences, the Royal Academy of Science. And she wrote a lot of papers, did a lot of work. And if you look her up on Wikipedia or you look her up in Britannica, she's listed as Austrian Swedish. I'm not sure on why. I guess I could start calling myself Swedish, or I could call myself English because I lived in England for a year, or maybe I mean, I have French heritage, so I could say I'm French because I also lived there for about a year. And then, of course, I have the heritage. And I've been to Ireland a few times and I got Irish heritage, so I guess I'm Irish. But she's apparently Austrian Swedish. And it's a shame that we missed out on this yesterday. She did die in Cambridge, England. That's where she's buried. But it would be great if somebody like Ebba Busch had known about this woman and her accomplishments and what she had done in nuclear, because then we could actually promote and get it going. But thinking about this as well, when you look at this woman who was forced to come here as an emigre from Austria at a very bad time, we took her in and we had this fantastic immigrant. And the politics right now, Social Democrats are campaigning hard against the Sverigedemokraterna. And that's why I bring up this issue, because the Sverigedemokraterna are pushing about the immigrants that we're taking in and saying that we've adopted a crime culture by adopting some of these people. And they're using recent court cases as examples. You do have bad apples coming in, but it would be probably more productive to focus on fixing things. But the other problem is that Sverigedemokraterna have a point about there's a two-tier system of justice. And so you have people who are committing crimes, and in the past, they would have been in jail for longer periods of time. But this has been an erosion of policy for the last 10, 15 years. I've seen it happening. So it's a tough time. But you do have the campaigns going back and forth. Social Democrats are talking about how corporations are the ones who shut down the nuclear plants. Meanwhile, Social Democrats were promoting the use of wind turbines, which are more expensive, and then saying that electricity is cheap and then could be achieved through wind turbines. And that's not true, because if you look at what's going on down in Atlanta, Georgia, and the two power plants or the nuclear power reactors that were built, they cost 30 billion. Okay, 30 billion. And if you compare that to what Texas spent, 66 billion, you have a much better ratio on efficiency and cost and energy production, because you can get electricity from a nuclear power plant when you need it. So this is, we're seeing a lot of the backdrop on the politics, and we're seeing a lot coming through in the recent court cases and the current constant violence that we have, more people being shot. But if we focus on what else is happening, we had the SCB, our Swedish Central Statistics Bureau, come out with figures about the economy. Looks like the economy might have done a little bit better than people had anticipated in January. So the big fear is continuing to be on the interest rates. And I think that's a worthwhile fear. Most of the Swedish economists are now adjusting up their rate count, but they're now coming in line where they think it'll be finalized and be done by June. So we'll see what happens. June is a good time to take a look, because that's when our country is in highest level of production up till June. Then we start getting into the summer breaks, and we have factory shutdowns and so forth. And then we go into the fourth quarter where you get the re-up of the economy. It's an interesting time that we're approaching, and you have to look at the what's happening on the household economy, and the Swedish households are suffering. You're even getting comments now where households are told, why don't you do most of your grocery shopping when the food is on sale? I guess that works if you have a freezer. Not everybody has those big freezers to store all their food. But some of it does work. And Sweden is a culture where you do save and you do prepare for the future. We have phrases here like, there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing. In Swedish, it rhymes. We're looking at a situation where the conditions are really bad. Swedes are even going over to Norway to buy food because they find food cheaper in Norway. And I remember when I've gone to Norway for business trips, I always thought everything was much more expensive. And now Norway looks cheap thanks to the inflation we've been experiencing. Um, and we had those Swedish Norway trade figures, 10.4 billion Norwegian kroner, and so it looks to continue. So if you're looking at equities and spaces in there, we have really effectively three different companies that are dominating the food market. One would be ICA, the others would be Willys, and then the third would be Coop. We've had the entrance of other players. Maersk used to have, I think they still have a supermarket division. It's called Netto, that had been trying to enter into Sweden. You have Aldi, the Germans. You also have recently we've seen the U.S. company Costco came into the northern part, north of Sweden, and is trying to get established there. So you do have some smaller chains in the regional areas, but generally speaking, it's controlled by three different companies. In the business sector, air circulation companies doing relatively well. And I think that was partly a COVID response. Everybody wants to make sure the air is good and they're breathing well, especially if they're going to be in the office. So we've had that. The banks should continue to be focusing or functioning with the increased rates. And as people are increasingly looking at 6%, the banks would be earning more money. And I think another very interesting thing that's developed is Spotify is talking about reintroducing their vertical video. Now, this is, in competition with TikTok, and TikTok is now trying to introduce music and get the music platform going. They already have the video. They're pretty much that. They own the space effectively, even in the United States. But Spotify is trying to combat this and gain market share. And you just saw TikTok being kicked off all the European Union devices. So Spotify is a European company, started in Sweden. Daniel Ek, he's Swedish. And this would be a fantastic move for Spotify if they could replace what was being done with the EU and other government institutions with their own device or their own product, their own app. So their numbers just recently came in. They had something like over 100 subscribers, and they have over 400 million, and that's 100 million subscribers, paid subscribers. They have over 400 million monthly users. So you're looking at a company where they are profitable. Maybe the subscriber rate could grow a little bit better. So they'll have to work on that. But they're also offering the videos now. They've topped out on the podcast. They have the most popular podcast in the world, with Joe Rogan, and you have other issues. So if you might be one to take a look at on the charts, it's not a screaming buy, but it could be. And we're trying to get some comments from a colleague of ours, hopefully tomorrow night. We should have a video link connection to possibly discuss that. And then wrapping up Scandinavia, there's a New York Post story talking about a Danish Viking find with the ancient god Odin, and it predates the previous thoughts. And then you have the gold coins being found in central Denmark, which are predating what was found in Germany. So there's a lot of discussion there. And then if we look at the overall markets, you had the Beige Book report yesterday. I've included the Fed Reserve general notes on all the Fed banks, and what you have is the discussion for the labor markets and really kind of the smaller components to the economy. So if you look geographically on the East Coast, you see an easing of the labor market. It's easier to find people. But if you go out to the West, Midwest, you're looking at still relatively tight labor markets. And if you go down to say like the Atlanta Fed, which covers Florida, they've had a little bit of backing, but then again, you had the storms, okay? You may see some kind of residual effect from there. And then you also have in the beige book, California, San Francisco Fed, where you still see strong consumer spending. The recent notes from the Fed have been more about what's going on in terms of the labor market. So I think globally, we're looking at continued rate hikes in Europe, Sweden, of course, in the US. But the question is, at what speed will they be at in the US? I think in Sweden, we're looking at a 50 to 75 basis point. Majority of the market at this point is looking at 75 basis points. But we will probably be getting very close to 6% for the consumer at the end. And then, the idea about the electricity and Tesla, and looking at the inclusion in different ETFs like ARK Invest. And ARK Invest was introduced to the Avanza platform last year. So you can look at all of these different indices, index funds, ETFs, and discuss those with your advisor. But those are the things that we're seeing right now, and I'm going to wish you a lot of success, and I hope you're subscribed and you like the videos, and you can find all the information on Substack. So subscribe there as well. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.